Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Come Over for Dinner. I'm so excited you're joining me today. Today, I have a very special guest. She lives in Olympia, Washington. Her name is Katie Cheney. She is a homeschooling mom of three. She has three girls and a brand new baby boy. He is just 5 weeks old, and he is cute as can be. If you could see him, you would fall in love with him. He's just adorable. So he's joining us too, in case you hear a few baby sounds in the background. Right now he's asleep, so he may stay that way. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks for having me. It's really nice to put the face with the voice. and
Yes. Well, she is joining me over Zoom, so it's very fun. I'm hoping the audio turns out well. If not, this is still an experiment in progress, so we'll get it down. So, Katie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Like you said, I have four kids, six and under, 6 to 5 weeks old. We live in Olympia, Washington. My husband and I met actually in your neck of the woods at Washington State University. We were there for 6 years for undergrad and grad school, got married right before grad school. And then after school, we moved out to Portland, Oregon, and we got out of there just in the nick of time before things started getting bad before COVID. And we moved back to Olympia, Washington because my parents live in town. We have a really awesome church here. We love the Lord, and we're really happy to be here raising our kids. And we love to show hospitality to people. We love having people over for dinner.
Well, that is a great summary, and how fun that you were able to move closer to parents, especially when you have four children under 6 years old. It's really important to have grandma down the road when that's the case. Okay, so jumping into hospitality, you enjoy having people over. Tell us about some of the hospitality that you do. You mentioned you
Yeah,
attended church in Olympia.
yeah. We love having fellowship with folks from our church. We love having people come over for dinner from church. Sometimes we have our neighbors over. But I got to tell you, I used to really not enjoy showing hospitality. I used to really dread it. And I actually considered myself not a hospitable person at all. And I just didn't really understand God's command to us to show hospitality. And it's only been in recent years that I have really started to, I guess, obey God and show hospitality and sacrifice. I think what it came down to is just like a bad attitude and selfishness. And I didn't want to share my time. I didn't want to share my resources. I didn't want to be outside my comfort zone. And it actually took a friend of mine and her husband, my friend Julia Coffey. She's a good friend of mine from college, and she and her husband, he was in not residency. He was in med school. He was doing rounds in Olympia, and they came and lived here for a year. We actually swapped hospitality twice a week. We would go over to her house for dinner, or she would come over to our house for dinner. Their family would come over, and she was kind of like my training wheels for hospitality. It was just very easy having their family over. At that time, we only had our oldest daughter, and actually Julie and I were pregnant with our second kids at the same time, and so we had some sweet fellowship there. But it was just really easy having them over, and it just showed me how much joy there is in fellowship with believers over food. And it was just a really, really fun time. And also, Julia is an amazing cook, and she always would cook the most interesting foods. She cooked this 7 course Chinese meal for her husband for his birthday, and I kind of got to assist, and that was so fun. And I was just like, Julia, you're so creative. And so she really inspired me to kind of branch out past meat and potatoes to more exotic and even more interesting foods. You can make meat and potatoes really interesting, but just foods that maybe seem a little bit more intimidating or are outside of our culture. And so she kind of inspired me to do that, and also to show hospitality. Julia is very, very hospitable, and she was a big inspiration for me to, yeah, just kind of get out of my comfort zone, and also just to obey God, to actually show hospitality to people. After they left town, when he was done with his rotations, my husband and I were like, this is such a special thing to get to have people over for dinner. We should start having people over from church. And so we started having people over from church. And I'm not going to say that it was me that started this. This is not me at all. But I've noticed that myself and a couple other ladies from church have really started to show hospitality a lot more. But I feel that friends and I from church are definitely spurring each other on to show hospitality and to be generous and have people over. And so it's been really fun to see like our church grow in that. That's an area that I think our church really can grow in. And it's been really fun to see people interested in hospitality and even people saying like, I feel a little intimidated about showing hospitality, but I really want to. And it's encouraging to see people's hearts for the people in our church and also the people in their communities. So yeah.
Well, what a wonderful story. And your point about your friend or your friends currently, the church ladies that you are around and do hospitality with, your point about just spurring each other on to love and good works is a great one. The conversation, the fellowship, you leave encouraged. Just sharing your lives with each other. You get good advice, you get good encouragement, you get good ideas, whether it's for recipes or child raising or who knows what. There's always enriching conversation. So I really enjoy getting together with fellow Christians for that reason.
Absolutely. And you really just don't have the same kind of fellowship after church. It's like that's when you try to like get in your conversations with people, but then you also want to be like greeting visitors and making sure your children aren't running out to the parking lot. And it can just be, it's hard to have fellowship with people at the end of church.
It's
Excuse me.
very difficult at the end of church because if you're spending 5-10 minutes to do a quick hello, 5 or 10 minutes, you barely get past the surface. You're not having a deep conversation or an in-depth, any kind of in-depth conversation, most likely in the middle of the busyness of church. Like you
And
say, you're trying to talk to multiple families, greet new visitors, that sort of thing. So it really does take bringing them into your home, going to their home, having an event like let's all get together at the park or something a little bit more that you can really get to know that family.
absolutely. And I found that like the times that I felt the most loved by people is when they've had me into their home. When we were new at the church, some friends of ours, the Montes, had us over for dinner, and that's kind of how they started getting to know us. And then our pastor and his family had us over for lunch after church, and I know that that's how they like to show hospitality in their home is having new people over after church, just kind of spontaneously. And then, really specifically, when I lived in Portland, there was a really wonderful woman named Wendy who was an empty nester and had this beautiful kitchen. And she had a mom's group where she would have ladies and their kids come over and she would make us breakfast or a treat on Friday mornings. And it was just, she just facilitated fellowship for us. And that was a really, really hard time in my life when I was dealing with some difficult postpartum issues with my first child and just in the weeds of new parenting and just not knowing what I was doing. And she was there for me in some really, really difficult times and really supported me. And that came about because she was showing hospitality. She opened her home to me, and I told her before I left Portland, I'm like, Wendy, I want to do this when I'm all grown up. when I'm an empty nester, I want to be able to show hospitality in this really specific way of being a woman who is older with more experience and doesn't have kids at home, but is opening my home to moms and providing that kind of fellowship facilitation. That really meant a lot to me. And there are other women in my community right now that do the kind of the same thing, and it just really means so much to me. And my
Well,
kids are also really loved on too, which is wonderful.
in this particular instance, she's not just obeying the command to be hospitable, she's also obeying the command for the older women to be available to minister to the younger women and to pass on that wisdom and encouragement and offer them that sweet fellowship like you're talking about. So hospitality can look like so many different things besides dinner. And the group you mentioned sounds incredible. And exactly like you said, what you needed for that time in your life to have someone who's been through it, made it to the other side, come along and say, listen, you can do this. let me
Absolutely.
let me help you. Let me offer you encouragement. Let me give you some tips, whatever it was to share her the wisdom God had already given her through her life of raising children and having them grown and fly out of the nest. Sometimes when you're in the thick of it, when you have a lot of tiny kids, it can seem like this will last forever. And those of us who have had all of their children leave the nest, I only have one left and he's quickly approaching flying away. I can look back and remember those times when I thought that, like, this is just going to last forever because the days go on and on and on. And it's just constant work and laundry and dishes and wiping noses and, all the things. But I look back now and think, wow, that really flew by. It just.
Say that. Everyone keeps saying that.
It's so true. And I think that both are reality. When you're in it, it really can be some long days where you're just having to dig in and just be in the trenches and put one foot in front of the other and just fight the good fight to go through that long race. And then there's also that feeling at some point in life when you're like, wow, that really flew by. And it's odd to realize, okay, both are true. Anyway, but yes, to have someone be able to give you some encouragement and wisdom and a perspective of one day this will all not be here. They will all be grown, and just really appreciate the moments you have now, even the hard ones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So going back to what you said initially about your dread of hospitality, you dreaded it. You didn't really feel great about sharing resources and time and work, money. Tell me a little bit about that. What made you dread having someone over? Just that it was so hard in the time of life you were in with a young child?
Yeah. It's a little hard I think it really just was a bad attitude. I can be really practical. Like, there's a time to be practical. It can be a good thing. It can get the laundry done and the dishes done. But I think I was so practical that I was losing sight of what I'm for. I was losing sight of the fact that God called me to show hospitality to my family, but also to people outside my family. I didn't really understand, like, I guess, like how to have community through hospitality, like how important that is, and how God wants us to be generous with our time and with what we have. And that's really a main way to do it, especially when you're at home with little people. You can prepare dinner for people and they can come over to you. It's almost like one of the easiest things that you can do for people is just say, hey, we're going to be eating. I'm sure you're probably going to be eating too. Why don't you come over and join us? I think it really just was an attitude issue and my practicality getting in the way of what I should have been doing. Another thing, I did not know how to cook. My husband and I have funny stories about our early married years, and salt chicken is one of our stories. Oh my goodness. So this is I have a couple stories where I tell on myself silly things that I've done, but I like almost poisoned us with salt. I would watch my grandma make fried chicken, and she would take Johnny seasoning salt, and she'd have the chicken in the frying pan and salt, 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 flip, salt, 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 flip. And I asked her one time, I was like, how do you do this? Because I like almost poisoned us one time, like a sodium poisoning. And my grandma was like, oh yeah, that's how I do it. Salt, salt, flip. I'm like, okay, well, I was doing something wrong because this chicken was inedible. Like it was like preserved with salt. My husband and I took one bite. My husband's like, I don't think I can eat this. I don't think you should. So there are funny stories like that where I just didn't know how to cook and felt really intimidated by cooking and wasn't even really sure how to learn how to cook. And so I felt insecure about feeding people outside my home because I felt like I didn't really have a lot to offer. But I guess that was part of it too. So I just felt insecure about what my skills were, but it's not, that hospitality is not supposed to be about you. It's not supposed to be about your skills. It's not about showing off. And so, yeah, again, it's just an attitude problem.
So how did you learn how to cook? So there is the reality that, I feel like all of us, no matter how good of a cook we are, have things to learn and grow in ways we can improve our skills, new things to learn in the kitchen, maybe new ideas, new types of food, like you were talking about your friend who created a Chinese 7-course menu. I could not do that. So we all have our different strengths, but there is the reality that there are truly people who do not know how to cook. They were not raised to cook. Their parents never taught them how to cook. maybe their own parents didn't cook. I know my mom was raised by a working mother who was not a Christian, and I doubt she cooked. I think they probably the kids probably fed themselves canned food and whatever they could assemble type thing. So when my mom got married, she did not know how to cook, and she had to struggle and to learn how to cook, and she did, and she taught all of her girls. She had 4 girls. She taught all of us to cook. Doesn't mean that we're fabulous gourmet cooks, but we learned the basics and then kept going from there. So what was your story? How did you learn? Because there are people out there who would say, well, that's me. I don't cook good enough to have people over.
I started out realizing like I don't even know what a good recipe looks like. And now I can look at a recipe and say, oh, that's not going to work, or oh, I'd like to tweak that and that will be better. Not so much with baking. Baking's, science experiment, but with like a weeknight dinner recipe, I can look at it now and say that's good or that's not going to work. And so not knowing that I didn't know what was good, I found something that I knew was good just because it had a reputation. So I got my father-in-law got me the Mastering the Art of French Cooking by Julia Child, which for some people might look really intimidating, but I'm the kind of person that I'm like, just give me like the step-by-step directions and like give me something that's really, really vetted and really good, and I'll see what I can do. And the really great thing about that recipe book is even though it's there are some very exotic recipes like sweetbrains, like not everybody wants to eat pancreas, but there are also there's also some really amazing, just like stews, like boeuf bourguignon. Like that's an amazing meal. And I remember I made that for the first time for my husband, and I could not believe that I had made that because her steps are just like so detailed and so easy to follow and so meticulous and detailed that I was able to recreate this beautiful meal having almost no cooking skills. And so if you're feeling ambitious, but you're also not sure how to cook, then check out that book because it's a lot of fun. Also, it's just really cheeky, like the little things that she like her voice just really comes out in that book. And I think she's just a really charming person. So I really enjoyed Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And then aside from that, asking friends for recipes is another really great way because you're like, someone has tried this and someone has liked it, and we probably will like it too. Friends of mine, we have a recipe thread where we share recipes, and that's a really great way. Sharing recipes with friends on Pinterest, that's another great way. I think just finding and then just like cooking through recipes, just finding something like, I would like to learn how to make pad thai. Let's just find a recipe. I think generally like Pinterest is what I go to. Let's just find a recipe that looks tasty and see if I can find the ingredients in the grocery store and just try it out. If you're the person that likes to just wing things a little bit more, maybe just like trying recipes is a little bit more up your alley. Or if you want to have someone tell you what to do like I do. That's kind of how I got into cooking. And then I realized this is so much fun. Like this could be a huge chore that I do every day, or it could be like a huge joy. And I could have a bad attitude about feeding my people every day, or I could have an attitude of excellence and an attitude where I am really trying to bless them, and really just turns out to be blessing my husband because he enjoys the food I make. My kids don't because they're little people and they just want mac and cheese, which I tell my daughter, they're going to change. They're going to change, and it's not going to be so hard to eat. On your podcast, a couple people have mentioned the Tamar Adler's.
Oh, yes. Why am I blanking on it too?
Anyway, in her book, I love what she says about kids. She says,
I'll look it up.
For children, eating is a beastly reality. And I remember it being a beastly reality for me when I was a kid. And I can see how eating is such a beastly reality for my children too. It's like, okay, so I'll cook for my husband, and I'll cook for myself, and my children will take a bite, and
yes, and they will learn
we'll
to
try.
appreciate it. You're actually teaching them to love good food. So keep at it. An everlasting meal, cooking with economy and grace. This one young mom that I was associated with, we were talking about little kids. We had kids around the same age, and she's talking about the same thing you mentioned, just difficulty with eating. And she said, she's talking about her, I don't know, 2-year-old. and how they just wouldn't eat anything. And all they would eat was chicken nuggets and chips or something horrible. It's like, well, if that's all you feed them or allow them to eat, if you allow them to just push aside everything else, and then you reward that with the chicken nuggets and fries or chips or whatever she was feeding them, then they never will learn to appreciate those vegetables and all that good home cooking that, well, I don't know if she was doing good home cooking, but you are. If you're cooking from Julia Child most nights, then those kids need to be eating that food. And one
I'm
day,
definitely I'm definitely not cooking for Julia Child most nights, but there are definitely a lot of skills from her cookbook that transfer.
well, she
Um,
is a great resource. She, of course, was a teacher. She
mhm,
had a cooking show. She wrote numerous books. So she is a fabulous resource, great personality. And learning those skills, learning those techniques could transfer into other recipes, being able to judge whether they're going to be good or how to tweak them for your family. And then just over time, you develop favorites that you can go back to over and over, and they seem easier to make because you've done it and you know that they're going to work when you have company over. You're not having to recreate the wheel or try something brand new. So that's a really good tip. I think if you can trust the source and they offer good instruction, then you can feel like, okay, I can do this. I can learn how to cook, because a lot of times you're just reading and understanding what they're saying. I tell my son that with cooking. It's like, just read what they're writing and follow those instructions. It's really not rocket science, but for some reason we turn cooking into rocket science as if it's just unattainable. And it's
mhm.
really not. If you have a source you can trust. There are recipes out there that you read and follow and do exactly what they say, and they're a disaster. So you want to get good recommendations from friends. You mentioned recipes from friends. That's a fabulous idea, which is part of the come over for dinner idea, is that we're getting tried and true recipes from lots of ladies who have used them in their own homes and for hospitality, that say, this works. This really works. And your recipe thread idea is a fabulous one, because it would inspire you to create something new. I know for me, a lot of times I'm just like, oh, I don't feel like cooking anything. Nothing sounds good. Do I even know how to
Mhm.
cook anymore? What should I cook? And recently, this about a month ago, I texted a friend. We were talking about what we were cooking, and I said, "Well, I just made these waffles. It's an oldie but goodie recipe, Southern living, out of this world waffles. So delicious and so easy because there's no yeast. You don't have to let them rise. It's just super simple, but they're tried and true. You can rely on that recipe." Immediately, her response was like, "I'm making those this morning. I didn't know what I was going to make, but my son would love those." I was like,
Awesome.
we should text each other back and forth what we're making, or do a recipe thread, or that's a fun idea, because then you get inspiration from friends. So what is one
Um,
of your favorite menus that you would serve when you invite people over?
I really enjoy Middle Eastern food, and there is a chicken shawarma dish that I really enjoy serving to people because it's allergen friendly and it is really beautiful. And it's also really easy to prep ahead of time, and it's really healthy. It's delicious. This chicken shawarma, it's a marinade that you put chicken in. It can be any kind of chicken you want, but I use chicken breasts. When I put them in the marinade, I pound the heck out of them when
Oh,
they're in the bag. I kind of pound them to a pulp. So
actually,
when
that's a great tip, because when you make them even, they cook better. So
mhm,
chicken breasts have a really fat end and a thin end, but if you
yeah,
can pound them to where they're uniform, then your cooking is so much easier.
and they're so tender and they kind of look like you've made mush of them, but really they just are, I think they're extra delicious. But this marinade has tons of spices in it. So many spices that you look at the recipe, and I think the recipe is for something like 3 chicken breasts or something, the marinade recipe. And you think there's no way that I'm putting a tablespoon of cardamom and a tablespoon of coriander and a tablespoon of cumin all into this. But it actually is just absolutely delicious if you really do want all the spices. There's lemon and olive oil and lots of garlic. The garlic really comes out so tasty. And it makes this really, really It makes for this really, really rich chicken, rich with the spices and the oil, which over fresh lettuce and cucumbers and tomato and pickled red onions, it's just a really great combination. And then I do a shawarma sauce. It's a white yogurt sauce, which is similar to tzatziki. It doesn't have cucumbers in it. And that has dill and mint and Greek yogurt and that really tangy, that the tanginess of that really offsets the richness of the chicken. And then also the pickled red onions with their zest also offset that richness. I found it's really nice to have really diced up pickled red onions instead of long strips of red onions. Just spreads out that tart flavor better. I also do a tahini sauce, a lemon garlic tahini sauce. And I find the trick with the tahini sauce is just to keep adding a little bit of water until it mixes smooth, because you add a little bit of liquid to tahini and immediately it seizes up. You just kind of have to keep whisking it and adding a little bit of water until it's smooth. And so do not panic if your tahini does not turn into a paste.
Just add water and it will eventually.
It will eventually smoothen out again.
Well, that menu sounds delicious. It sounds like it's just bursting with flavor. Are those spices fairly easy to find at a regular grocery store, or do you have to find some of them at a ethnic grocery store?
Yeah, I don't have to go to a Middle Eastern market or anything like that. I'm sure that if you did, you would probably get some exceptionally fresh spices. But I don't think we even have a Middle Eastern market in our area, at least not that I'm aware of. I really like bulk spices at Winco. We have a Winco in Olympia. Winco is my jam. So I will hit up Winco for bulk spices.
Well, this sounds delicious. I will post this on my website, comeoverfordinner.com. Look for it there. Did you have a dessert that you serve with this menu?
I will look through the Jerusalem cookbook for different recipes. I think the desserts are just best make ahead, and most desserts are make ahead. But I've done spice cookies from that cookbook. Tahini cookies are also really great. They're kind of like peanut butter. They're like Middle Eastern peanut butter cookies. Tahini is a sesame seed paste. There is a yogurt. Wait, no, it's a milk pudding. Milk pudding with pistachios and bay leaf syrup. That's kind of a fancier one. And it's pretty light on the sweetness, and it's a little bit of a showstopper. It's like, oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful
It sounds
recipe.
very unique.
Actually very, very easy. It's really tasty and easy and make ahead. And but it also just like delights people, because people in my area at least, generally don't eat Middle Eastern food very often. And so it's kind of like, whoa, celeb. I've never made that before. It's called celeb. It has a whole bunch of different names, and the one that's actually in the cookbook, I cannot pronounce it, so I won't even try. But one of the names is celeb.
So you can easily make the desserts ahead of time. Do you make any other parts of your menu ahead of time, or does it really need to be made right before you serve?
You do not have to make it right before you serve. I mean, you could have it cold. You could have cold chicken. Some people don't like the flavor of cold chicken, but it would be delicious, I think, cold as a cold salad or a cold bowl. Oh, I also forgot to mention, unless somebody is allergic to rice, which I do know one person that tries to avoid rice, I will make a golden rice with this meal to make it a little bit more of like a bowl instead of a salad. Everything except for the rice you can make ahead of time, and then you just grill up the chicken really quickly. You can also pan fry the chicken. You can bake it in the oven, but on the grill, it just gets that nice char, because I think it just really makes the flavors pop. But yeah, I mean, like the night before, I will chop all the vegetables and pickle the red onions. And if I have really thought ahead, I will put all of the marinade ingredients and the chicken in the plastic bags and freeze them and pull them out like 2 days beforehand. So that's just all done. I mean, I think people have said on the podcast before, but it's like, if you have little kids, it's never too early to prep dinner. It just makes for mom having extra bandwidth.
Yes, absolutely. So what is your best prep tip? Working ahead?
Definitely working ahead. You can never prep dinner too early, I think. There are, of course, certain ingredients that you need to do at the last minute. Avocados, for example,
right?
Will oxidize.
You don't want to serve avocados that you chopped yesterday.
You don't want
You're going to serve brown avocados.
Yeah. Prepping ahead of time. And as far as like cleaning the house and stuff, I like to do things kind of just as I do them throughout the week. Like I will mop the floors and clean the bathrooms on Monday. We'll often have guests on Thursday. And so I will actually just take like a baby wipe to the bathrooms. And like I know our our bathrooms are not filthy because they have been cleaned a couple days ago, but they might have some dust on them. They might have few little stains that need to be kind of like mopped up, but they don't, in my mind, they don't need to be sanitized
Right.
before people come over, but they do need to look pleasant. And so I will just kind of run into the bathroom, just kind of wipe them down really quickly and make sure there's a towel, make sure there's toilet paper. But overall, prepping for guests, just doing my normal chores throughout the week, making sure that those are actually done, just sets me up for success for when people are actually coming over on the day that they're over, which is usually Thursday.
Your tip on toilet paper needs to be heard by all. When I was a child, I don't know if I've mentioned this on here before, but it just stands out in my memory, probably because it was so traumatic. But we were at someone's home and I had, I guess, been told to go to the upstairs bathroom. Someone was in the downstairs bathroom. So I trot all the way upstairs to this upstairs bathroom and there's no toilet paper. I don't know what to do. I don't know, like 9 years old. Anyway, it was very traumatic.
That is really traumatic.
I don't even remember. I think I ran downstairs and found some napkins and ran back upstairs. It was awful. So I have had that in my, yes, I have had that in my mind of, okay, we know there's a roll in there, but always make sure there's extra under the sink in case.
Sure.
Case guests go to digging because 10 other people have used the bathroom.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
In the interim of you getting it ready.
Good advice for all of us.
Yes, good advice.
It's good advice for just your family, like you don't want to be the one waddling down the hallway to get toilet paper,
or yelling and asking someone to throw some under the door. Well, not under the door, but opening the door, stealing the toilet paper through the crack in the door.
I think I have yelled for my 6-year-old to go, or my 3-year-old to go get toilet paper, and she comes back with a roll of paper towels.
I did it.
Good job. Get the smaller one. Oh man.
Oh wow. Well, speaking of warm hospitality, do you have any advice beyond providing toilet paper to your company to make them feel welcome when they come into your home?
My mom runs really cold, and so she will often come to my house bundled up. So I'll be like, okay, we need to make sure that it's like a little bit warmer for mom because I don't want her to be freezing in our house. That's more in the winter. Summer is not such a problem. One thing that I found really blesses people is when you love on their kids. I mean, you have kids and you know how endearing it is when somebody blesses your kids or it shows interest in your children, especially when your kids are in an environment that is a little bit intimidating. It's a little bit scary for kids to, go over to a new house. I remember that as a kid, just feeling intimidated going to new houses and you have to be on your best behavior. It's like, yeah, you do. And you're trying to be, polite and respectful and on your best behavior. That can feel like some pressure. And so helping kids to relax a little bit and asking them fun questions. My husband is really good with kids and he asks really fun and funny questions and is really good at getting shy kids kind of out of their shell. And
that's a great piece of advice for the busy adults, especially the busy hostess, to stop and make sure that they take time to greet the children, know their names, interact with them, and not just overlook them in order to visit with the adults. I know
I think it can be easy to do that, just to overlook the kids. Like you're having the parents over, and the kids are just auxiliary. They're not,
they're not.
They are an integral part of that family and dearly loved. And you show them that they're dearly loved,
For sure. And those parents bringing those children have prepped them, have talked to them about greeting the host and the hostess and looking them in the eye, shaking their hands, whatever it is, that those parents are working with the children to learn how to speak to adults and interact with adults and not be afraid of that and to be able to do it well. And so giving them that opportunity is just great on both sides. It's good as a hostess to do that just because that's good manners. And then on the other side, it gives the children a chance to practice what their parents have been working so hard to teach them. What is your must-have kitchen item and where can we find it?
My must-have kitchen item are my stainable steel knives. Stainable steel, carbon steel, and stainless steel are different in that stainable steel, it will rust and it needs to be, it's a little bit more high maintenance. When you use it, you have to wash it right away. If you live near salt water, you probably shouldn't get it because it will probably rust. Other than those caveats, stainable steel, carbon steel takes an edge really, really good, and you can get your knives razor sharp really fast with just a few flicks of your knife sharpening steel or your sharpening stone, your whetstone. And then you can chop, chop, chop and sharpen it again. It does need to be sharpened frequently. And the reason I like these over stainless steel starts out razor sharp, but over time it dulls and you're going to be really, really hard pressed to get that edge back. It needs to be professionally done. So it's just really nice to be able to take care of my own knives and not have to fuss with sending them off somewhere. There's a place called Seattle Edge, which it's kind of this little hole in the wall knife store in Seattle. And I've never been there, but my mom has, and she ordered a couple knives, really like them. And I got a couple of their knives and they are really, really nice and they're beautiful. I think the ones that I got, they're French made. I think they're called Sabier, 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 like that. And they're beautiful. They have this like cherry handle and they just are really, really fantastic. And the customer service with Seattle Edge is also really, really fantastic. I actually asked for information I asked for recommendation from the store owner. What kind of knife do you think I should get? I said, oh, you should get this one. It's like, oh, okay. And then I was looking at the specs, like, oh, the knife blade is not quite as high as I'd like it to be. It's not as big a knife as I want. And so I actually ordered a more expensive one. And he emailed me and said, hey, I saw your order. I just wanted to make sure that this is actually the one that you want. And I just was really impressed with their customer service. And
that is good customer service, that he's paying attention and really wanting you to get what you would be happy with.
I really, really like them. They're expensive, but I mean, if you're going to buy a block set of knives, that's going to be expensive too. You really only need 2 knives in your kitchen. You need a good chef's knife and you need a good paring knife. Julia Child is the one that said this, so you know I'm right.
We trust Julia Child.
You trust Julia Child.
Reliable source.
If you have a chef's knife that's sharp enough, it will cut bread for you. So bread knives are really convenient with the serrated edge, but you really just a chef's knife.
Just a chef's knife and a paring knife, and you're good. And this quality of knife should last a lifetime. It sounds like if you invest in this high quality of a knife, that you're not going to be replacing it very quickly.
Right.
Do you have a story you'd like to share with us?
When I first started really actually digging into cooking, I really wanted to learn how to cook. Skylar and I had been married for a couple of years. We just finished grad school. During grad school, I was just, flying by the seat of my pants and not really, we were eating like bacon salads and canned soup and stuff like that, which is horrid now that I think about it. There's a place for it, but it's not every day like we were doing. I really wanted to learn how to cook. And so for some reason, I just latched onto crock-pot dump meals. And I was like, I'm going to figure out what is good in the crock pot. Figured out beef is really, really good in the crock pot. My mom has an amazing recipe that I will send you for crock pot roast. And
crock pot roast is delicious. It's the best way I've found to make roast, because if it can cook low and slow for 8 hours, it is just fall apart, melt in your mouth. Delicious goodness. I will say that I have tried the slow cooker setting on the Instapot, and it's not the same. You really need a slow cooker. It gets hotter. The Instapot was not hot enough. And you can't adjust the heat setting. But if you choose low on the slow cooker, it's perfect for 8 hours. Anyway, awesome. We'll have to post your mom's not so top secret recipe.
It's not a top secret recipe, and it's really tasty. in my journey to discover what is good in the crock pot, I also discovered all the things that are not good in the crock pot. I crock potted everything that you can crock pot and everything that you should not crock pot. And I never want to see another crock pot chicken ever again. It is, it's just, there's too much.
And
There are
your
several
husband,
stories. He was so gracious. I mean, I
he
would
had
make
to
these
come
crock
home and
pots.
eat crock pot dump meals every night.
Best, we would have some of these meals 3 nights in a row. And I was
Oh,
just like super
dear.
practical. Like, we're going to get all this bang for our buck with all of, like, I like wrote down, like, this is how much each of these meals cost per person. It's just like silly. It was just not
Well,
delicious.
when it's like that and you're eating it 3 times in a row and you didn't even like it the first time, yes, then food has probably become just about living. Like, okay, we're
Yeah.
eating only to not die. That's a
Yes.
pretty bad way to consume dinner every
It
night.
was not so nice. And my husband never complained. He was very gracious. I look back on the dark days of cooking.
The dark days when you were on the dark side of cooking.
When I was crock potting, those were the dark days. And I had a ceramic carafe for my crock pot, for my first crock pot. And I used my crock pot so much that I split it in half.
No, I've
It
never
just
even heard of that.
developed. Yeah, it just developed a crack down the middle. It wasn't drops or anything. It was just worn out.
It was
Please
being
let me
used.
die. It was just bad.
It was being used at max speed every day.
Yes. And then within the same crock potting era, Skylar's one of his coworkers, he had a coworker who lived in India that would once a year come and touch base with Skylar's company. Skylar wanted to have this man over for dinner. Married guy, probably in his 40s, very, very formal, very reserved. And I was like, okay, and what should we cook him? And I was like, well, he's vegetarian, so make something vegetarian. I'm like, all right. And it didn't occur to me to like look something up on Pinterest. I think I was still at the point where I just didn't know what was good and what was bad based on looking at a recipe. And so I was really not sure what to do. And so I was like, well, I know that beans and rice are vegetarian. So I made this man beans and rice with cheddar cheese, which I think is delicious, but it's not a company meal. And is very humble. But what was bad is on top of that, or as a side dish, I should say, I made boiled green beans. So it was like a double bean meal. And we had this like little card table, and this man comes like in his button-down shirt and slacks, and we're just not really sure like what to say to him. Like we didn't have people over very often. It was just very, very awkward, and the food was bad, and we just weren't sure what to say. And yeah, I felt looking back, I just remember feeling like I should have made something else. This is such a weird meal. Poor man that is from India, and I'm sure his wife makes him just the most flavorful, delicious, wonderful food. And we're
And
having boiled beans,
double beans on top of it all.
double beans.
I think we could probably all look back to our early days of hospitality and hosting people and realize we have come a long way.
Certainly.
I sure can. Oh, those early days, I definitely made some faux pas and made some recipes that weren't so great. Timing was off, burnt some things. I still do, honestly. I mean, I think even experienced cooks, there's times when it's like, how in the world did I mess this up? I've made this 100 times and it's not turning out. It just is what it is. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and taking time out of your busy day. That little baby is so cute and so precious, and he has not made anything but just happy noises.
Yep.
So thank you both for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.